Everyone join, no? 15. Just a second. Okay, let's start then. Okay, again, there will be session in morning, tomorrow morning. Okay, same time, 7 o'clock. Okay, so now I'm gonna start a remaining concept from Kubernetes. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen. Just a minute. Entire screen. Okay, able to see my screen? I have just shared my notepad. You were able to see this, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, there's this dialog box. Okay, so now I'm gonna start replicas and the replica set. So just for an, so we use terminologies called replicas and replica set in the Kubernetes. So what, see, we already know that this replicas that we're gonna use in the deployments when we create a deployment, right? So when we point replicas here, it will create a 3-pod, correct? So whereas the replicas, so in the deployment ML, so we define the replicas, right? Here, replicas. So here when we point to, it will create the duplicate, I mean, the copy of the pod to balance the load based on the content of request. So similarly, this replicas define means which represents the number of replica count that we defined in the manifest, so-called replicas. Okay, so I'll give the statement for replicas here because we use these terminologies in the Kubernetes when you are writing your YAML file. So each line has their own significance. We need to understand that. Okay, so replicas, and replica set we call it as. Okay, so now I'm gonna give the definition for replicas. Okay, so the replicas, as I said, the number of replica count that we defined in the manifest. Manifest in the sense we want to define the replicas in the deployment configuration, right? So that we call it as manifest file. Okay, so you need to make sure that when you're saying a manifest, it's a manifest of manifest file of deployment, manifest file of pod, manifest file of your services, right? So that we call it as someone wants to join. Yes, so called the manifest. So the replicas, so I'll give it here. This represents, okay, so this represents the number of replica count, the number of replica, the number of replica count that we defined, in the manifest. Okay, so called the replicas. Okay, so in the deployment, we maximum will keep it as replicas to 3 because it creates the replica of same pod to withstand our load based on the like the scales up and scales down. Whenever the demand increases, it increases the pod, and whenever the demand decreases, it decreases it. So that's how by creating the deployment, we do define the replicas, the number of replica count that we defined in the manifest. Okay, so called the replicas. So similarly, we do have the replica set. Okay, so what is mean by this replica set and why do we use? See, this the set of replicas, we call it as replica set, means which defines the stable set of replicated running pods. Okay, the stable set means under replicas we gonna point to, right? So this we call it as the stable set of, see here under deployment YAML configuration in the manifest we're gonna define replicas 2. When we pointing it to 3, this is the stable set of replicated running pods, correct? So this, when we point replicas 3, it is a stable set, right? Stable set in the sense the count of 3 replicas count a 3. The set of replicas we call it as replica set. That means the stable set of replicated running pod we call it as replica set. Okay, clear with this? So I'll give the definition for replica set here. Okay, I'll give it this way, which defines the stable set of replicated running pods. Okay, so as soon as you delete the pod, it will recreate automatically when we do the deployment. That's how we should configure in the deployment YAML configuration. So we make use of, so when you want to get kubectl get replica set, it will list in a single line of all 3 pods. So when you run kubectl get pods, it will list 3 pods of the replicas, right? The duplicate, the copy of the pod. So the complete set we call it as replica set. Okay, so which defines the stable set of replicated running pods. Okay, so make the statement simple and explain more. Okay, that's how we have to do in the conversation. Okay, that's why I'm giving a simple statement saying that defines the stable set of replicated running pods, so called replica set. Okay, so you guys are with me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now so let's move to the ingress and egress in Kubernetes. Okay, so what is mean by this ingress and egress that we gonna use in the Kubernetes? Okay, so I'll give the statement here. Ingress, sorry, ingress and egress. Okay, so this both represents, this comes under the networking part. Okay, so the networking part in the sense, see where the traffic coming into the cluster via the network, we call it as ingress. Okay, similarly the traffic going out of a network or a service, we call it as egress. You can keep remember saying in means traffic coming into a network or a service, means traffic coming into the cluster, because our services are hosted in the cluster itself, right? So similarly we do have ingress, the traffic coming inside, egress, the traffic going outside, means going out of a network, so where we expose our application. See, we do have 4 services to expose our application: cluster IP, node port, load balancer, and external name, right? Similarly, we do have the network component. Okay, the network concepts in Kubernetes called ingress and egress. Ingress is basically the traffic coming into a network or a service, means whenever we want to expose our application, expose to the internet, we should have the incoming and outgoing network that we can achieve through ingress and egress. Clear? Now I'll give the statement for ingress, the very first. Okay, so ingress, so traffic coming. It's a very simple statement. So I'll give it later on. I'll give the definition, the complete definition. Okay, traffic coming into a network. Okay, or a service. Okay. Similarly, egress, egress, traffic going going out of a network, network or service. Okay, so where we expose our services to the from cluster to the internet. Okay, so now, so let's say an example for ingress. So how do we give an example? So I'll give it here, example. So where you host your say suppose when you're accessing your web server, say suppose you, if you have your Tomcat, Apache Tomcat, it's a web application, right? So how your Tomcat is interacting with your cluster, which is hosted our containerized application, right? See, cluster is basically, it contains all the component including control plane, node component and the pod. It is basically the RBAC, means role based access control. It is bounded with the cluster network only internally. Now we do have hosted our application that we wanted to expose it to the internet, right? So we do implement ingress. Via the ingress, we do expose our application to the Tomcat, right? So before exposing it, we need to have the Docker image created of Tomcat that we need to deploy via the pod inside your node, and that we need to expose the services either of four. One you can choose with the very basic, that the default IP that we have to do it cluster IP to access the Tomcat application internally in the cluster. And once we able to access, we need to expose the Tomcat to the website, means external network, that we can achieve through ingress. So that connectivity we do achieve via the ingress only. Okay, so now let's say an example of web server. Okay, so this we can take an example of web server, say an Apache Tomcat. Okay, so similarly the egress is also, we can take your database, right? So the, I'll give it this way. So Kubernetes pod accessing an external database, right? External database. So this is an example. So say like when we want to expose, basically we need to have the application to be exposed, we need to have the manifest to be created. Once we are ready with the accessing the application internally within the cluster, that we need to expose it to the internet using ingress or egress. So in ingress, as I said, traffic coming into the network, and see, it is interlinked. Ingress and egress is interlinked, right? The traffic should come into the network, into the cluster, and traffic should go out from the cluster, right? That's how the communication should happen between the cluster and the internet in your web browser, right? So
I
for egress,
there is a so sorry to disturb, but we have a cluster IP, right? We can use directly the cluster IP. Why? What is the need of egress here exactly?
what is mean
Uh,
by cluster
which
IP?
means using cluster IP, we can directly access the external pods, right? Internally, all the pods can communicate with each other.
Yes,
So, what is the exact purpose of egress? So, here.
that's what I said. See, ingress and egress to see cluster IP is different.
Hmm.
We should not interlink with your networking component here.
No, no, no.
So
But
egress,
exact.
let me clear 1 minute. Egress is basically the traffic going out, means whatever the application that you should require the internet capacity to access your application from cluster to internet, not in the cluster internally.
Okay.
right? That's
Okay.
what I said here, right? Traffic coming into, traffic going out means the application accessing is different. The traffic is going out from your cluster to the internet is different, correct?
Okay. Yeah. Got it.
That's what I'm saying here. See, it is completely into the networking component that we are discussing here.
Okay.
The application accessing in internally in the cluster is different, right? Just you are making sure that you are able to access the application internally, means in the cluster. So to that application, your traffic should go out to access the communication between the web and your cluster, right? To expose. Suppose when we are able to access the web app as an WhatsApp application, we can have the particular app application, and we should also have our web application, right? We can access our any of the application in web, right? That communication is happening between the web and the cluster via the ingress and egress only. So normally we use egress to communicate between the web, internet, and to the cluster. And that doesn't mean that cluster does not have the internet connectivity, but to expose our application to the internet, to the web, we do implement ingress. Okay, now let's, is that clear? Is that clear, Rohit?
Yeah. Clear, sir.
Yes, sir. But in the last session, you said from node port also we can expose our internet, right? From inside to outside.
Okay, so when you are using node port, is it a secured one? Is it a recommended way to expose our application?
Okay,
Is it a
it's not a
safe?
secure. Yeah.
Is it a safer side that we expose the application that we use node port?
No, it's not a secure.
Correct, right? So either we should go external name to purchase the domain. So every application has their own domain, correct? Domain, we need to purchase it. Through that, we need to have the connectivity, right? And purchased domain, we do integrate in Ingress via the Ingress controller. There are some of the component that we use to achieve an Ingress that I'm going to explain here. Okay, see, we can also expose our application with a load balancer, node port, and external name, but those are all not secure, right? See, when you expose your application, when you see in your browser, not secure, right? That is not the recommended way to expose our application. That is not the permanent fix. It is basically the hot fix. So for trial and error, once we expose our application, we do expose via the node port. We can expose our application via the load balancer, even external name, a dummy domain. We can purchase it for the cheaper way and we can expose it. But how do we implement our application permanently? How these guys, WhatsApp, Facebook, this Flipkart, Amazon, they have their own dedicated domains, right? So why can't they have their node port? They are also able to access their application via the node port, right? Are we able to access via the node port as an Amazon application, as an Flipkart application? No, right? We will be having the dedicated domain, right? Correct, right? That is not secured way. Clear?
Yes, sir. Actually, we tried accessing application outside by using node port, and but we got a lot of errors. Like we are unable to access. We are able to access only through Amazon in case with this external resource only we are able to access. With kubectl we are unable to access. So
Kubectl in the
like
sense within the cluster you're saying?
yes, we try to access by using notepad. Notepad means it will access by using the cluster nodes, right? So when we try to
Yes.
access the
Cluster
application,
nodes, the port you need to point in your browser.
yes, we tried
The
to
node,
access,
hmm.
but it didn't work, sir. There is an error like the browser is not able to access, like cannot access. The error is it's not working normally. So
Now
when I
what
tried,
was the error? What was the error? What you are getting from your browser?
uh, like we get an IP, right? We use the notepad means we get default IP like three something. There is an IP range is there, right?
Now
30,000
which
something.
IP that you're using to access your application? The node
Uh,
port IP?
node port IP, once we run that node port AML file, we run that kubectl SV service, then then it will generate an external IP. One separate IP will generate with the node port range.
Yes.
Okay, with that IP, when we try to access the outside of the application with that same IP, it's
Okay.
not accessing. There is an error there is a too long to reach the page. Then error will come. It didn't work to access with the node port, and there is another service is there, right? It didn't work.
Have
So
you
what I
configured your networking rules?
networking roles? No. Networking roles means which networking roles
No, no,
I
no.
need to?
Rules I'm asking, because your complete cluster is on your instance, right? So normally we are practicing all the Kubernetes services internally in your AWS instance, right? So normally how it works, this task done by platform team, they are exposed our services via the IP. So they'll make a connectivity, they'll configure all the node ports and the IPs to be configured to expose our application via the, either it will be in your external IP or maybe in your internal IP, right? That is allowed in the organization. But here you should configure network rules under your security groups to allow this, right? Have you searched this error that you're getting? Did
Yes,
you
sir.
get any solutions?
Actually, I solved with that error, and it was telling that add that IP, whichever generated external IP in the node port, we have to add that into the security groups. So I have
Hmm.
added in the security group and allowed for anywhere IP, like for I enabled that IP. Even that time also it didn't work.
Now what is the error after adding it? What you are getting? What is the output that you got it from the
Same,
browser?
like it's too long to reach, and the page cannot be reached.
Okay, are
That's
you
the
able to
error one.
access that application internally in the cluster?
Yes, internally it is working fine, and it was showing because internally it's pinging also. Even I tried to curl the IP and it's working fine. But whenever I try to expose outside, it didn't work.
Okay, what was the application it is? It is getting started where I shared in the Docker image, the document. That is the one.
Uh,
Which application that you are trying to access via
Actually,
the node port?
I tried actually two applications. I tried with Nginx and I tried with Jenkins. Both applications didn't work.
Okay, when you are saying about the application that should allow based on the configuration to expose from the cluster via the node port to the internet, that should be accessible. See how normally works when we are implementing our own application, it will work. Why? Because we have not set any rules when we built an application, correct?
Yes,
by
sir.
default by default when we're using an external application, that is our Jenkins, your Nginx, maybe any application, if they set network rules which not be accessible to the internet, because anybody can store that application when they expose it, right? So
Yes, sir.
see here there are two things. One, you need to configure internally to expose our application. We need to set a security set of rules in your security configuration that you already done. The second point, if they disable network rules inside the application which we are not able to access it, this will not be able to access in the internet when you configure your security rules also in your network rules. Okay, now if the application that we are able to access within the cluster, then fine, means through that only we can understand internally it is working. They have disabled the network component in the web. Getting my point? That too, when you
Yes, sir.
purchase that application, Nginx is an application, a web application, right? And even Tomcat, right? So where we expose, it is an open source, anybody can use it. But when we're implementing it in internally with your own account, it will scan your complete data. They will check your license. If you purchased, it will be able to access. If not, the license, it will not able to work. I mean, it will not work only, right? That's how the all the application, all the licenses will work, right? Getting my point? You getting it? Or
Yes, sir. Understand.
yeah, that's how it works. So basically, see, if you purchase your own application, the license part, see, Jenkins has their own license, and even Nginx is also has their own license, because when we are having the dedicated applications to be exposed via the Kubernetes services, we should have the licenses properly, and the network rules to be configured. That is completely in the networking component, because our job is to configure, cluster, or manifest configuration to expose our application. If it is not working, then we need to contact the network team in the project. In our networking team, there is dedicated networking team, right? And that we need to connect with them, and they will enable the network rules to access that application. So the configuration part we take care, and then accessing part, the exposed components in the application, the network team should handle it, right? That's how the complete application and the the exposed component will work. Okay,
Okay.
clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes. So let's move to the concepts here. So I was saying the ingress and egress. So normally we use ingress to expose our application. Okay, so ingress is basically, as I said, ingress is an API object that manages external access to the services within the cluster. Means it exposes HTTP and HTTPS. So where we host our application in terms of HTTP and HTTPS. Through that, when we're able to access our application, it works only with the ingress. Okay, so I'll give a statement here. Ingress. See, this is completely in the networking part in Kubernetes. Okay, so if you dig more, you will get more clarity. You need to work. So the actual component, when you want to work, when you need to join the project, and you need to face the error that you're getting when you're configuring ingress and the domain to be purchased. You need to work end to end, then only you will get a clarity. Okay, so currently I'm going to explain both ingress and egress with an example of manifest. How do we write and what do we implement in that? But the ingress is the separate subject from the Kubernetes. Means within the Kubernetes only, but we do implement ingress. Your ingress protocol, right? Your IP address, correct? We need to connect through this ingress and we expose our application. Okay, so ingress is an API object that manages external access to services within, sorry, within a cluster. Okay, so within a cluster in Kubernetes. Okay, so basically, which helps to expose, an application, from outside the cluster. Okay, so which helps to expose our application from cluster to the web. You can take this way, you can understand it this way. So where we configure ingress, so we are able to access our application in the internet, in the web. Okay, so which exposes http and https. Okay, so both, when we're accessing the application in web, we should have https://www.jenkins.com, correct? Similarly, we should have HTTP. So through that, when we configure Ingress, we are able to access the application via the HTTP and HTTPS protocol, right? So to achieve Ingress controller should be configured. Okay, there are components in Ingress. To achieve an Ingress, we should have the Ingress controller should be configured. Okay, I'll tell you what is Ingress controller, and there are types of controllers that we gonna configure in Ingress manifest in the Ingress YAML file. Okay, so to achieve Ingress controller should be configured. Okay, so what is this Ingress controller? So say, like, let's take an example of Jenkins, right? So Jenkins has their own controller, right? The master, which controls all our job. Similarly, when we want to implement an Ingress, to achieve an Ingress controller should be configured. Ingress controller is a build, the package manager, where we achieve our Ingress via the Ingress controller. Okay, so I'll give an architecture of Ingress, how it works, and where the Ingress controller will come. Okay, so I'll tell that. So similarly, there are resources that we use in Ingress, which is Ingress controller, as I said, Ingress controller and the Ingress resource. So Ingress controller and the Ingress resources. Okay, so what are these Ingress resources and what are these Ingress controllers? So Ingress controllers are the controller where we manage our networking rules. Okay, so I'll give the diagrammatic representation here. Snipping tool. Okay, so let's say this is an request. I'll take it blue. Okay, so let's say this is the request coming from internet web, right? Let's say request. I'll call it as request. Okay, so this request will go to the Ingress managed load balancer here. Okay, it will go to the Ingress manager load balancer. Can write the text Ingress okay, so Ingress managed load balancer. I'll give it in a short form, managed load balancer. Okay, so any request will go to this Ingress managed load balancer, and this most pass the traffic to the Ingress. Ingress means where we configure our manifest. Okay, this we call it as Ingress. Okay, here our component will come. This we call it as Ingress. Okay, so from this Ingress we do configure the routing rule. Okay, we call it as routing rule here. Routing rule here. We do configure our routing rule after the Ingress. Okay, this moves to the services where we expose our, see, when we want to configure Ingress, we should be configured exposed our services. Okay, so here the services will come, right? Services. Okay, say like it has some IP, say like 3.4.6.2. Okay, so this is the services. This is the IP that we got from the services that we exposed. Okay, through this it will go to the pod 1 and the pod 2. I'll make this as pod 1. You were able to see this now, pod 1 and pod 2. So where are these pod 1, pod 2? Where we done the deployments, right? I'll increase this. Okay, so where we done the deployment, where we deployed it, right? So there will have the replicas. This set we call it as replica set. Okay, so the request will go to the actual pod here. So this request will come from the internet. It will go to via the Ingress managed load balancer. From this Ingress managed load balancer, it will go to the Ingress, this where we are working actually. From this Ingress, it will move to the services via the routing rule that we configure. Here we do have services. There are 4 services that we have in the Kubernetes, which is cluster IP, node port, load balancer, and the external name. Either of those we will be having the IP. So this is the IP of our services. Through this IP, it will move the traffic to the respective pods, which is pod 1 and pod 2. Means where we have our configured the pod in the cluster. Okay, this component we call it as, say like it's a cluster. This complete cluster happened. Erase. So this component we call it as cluster, right? This is our cluster. This is E, okay? Cluster, okay? So inside our cluster, we do have our ingress configured and the routing rule and the services that we exposed, and it will go, traffic will go to the particular pod that we have configured in the cluster, okay? So say like this pod 1 has Jenkins, okay, and this pod 2 as our Tomcat server, Tomcat application, okay. So the services will identify based on the content of request. Based on the request, it should go to the Jenkins, and if the request is related to the Tomcat, it should go to the Tomcat pod. That's how this traffic is configured in our Kubernetes cluster. You were able to understand this, the diagrammatic representation of the ingress, exposed ingress, the traffic coming into the cluster. You getting it? Yes. Okay. Now here, when I said ingress controller, to achieve this ingress, we need to configure the ingress controller. Okay. So as I said, there are 4 types of ingress controller. Okay. One is the Nginx, and the second one is an HA proxy. Third one is traffic. Fourth one is GCE, Google Cloud Engine controller that we use. Out of 4, you can use anyone as an ingress controller to achieve an ingress. Okay, now I'll give a statement here. Ingress controller and the ingress resources. So as I said, ingress controller are either we can go with Nginx, either we can go with HA proxy, either we can go with traffic, either we can go with the GCE as an ingress controller types. Okay, when we are talking about ingress resources in the sense where we configure our routing rule, where the traffic should go to, which pod should go to the traffic should go to Jenkins pod, or traffic should go to the Tomcat pod. That is decided by the routing rule via the ingress controller. Okay, the ingress controller helps to divert the traffic which is related to the particular pod. That's why we need to configure the ingress controller. Okay, now, so I'll give the statement this way. I'll give here controller, which helps to transfer the incoming requests to the routing rule which we defined in ingress. Okay, so this makes sense, right? So the ingress controller or the controller which helps to transfer the incoming request to the routing role. Let's go to the diagram. Okay, so here in the ingress manifest, in the ingress YML configuration file, we configured ingress controller. This ingress controller helps to route the traffic, transfer the request to the routing rule to pick the particular request to the particular pod. You getting my point? That's how, that's why we need to configure the ingress controller. Without ingress controller, we cannot achieve our ingress. We cannot, the request should not go to the particular pod. It will not go to the particular pod. Okay, so to achieve an ingress, we should configure the ingress controller. There are 4 types of controller that we use in the Kubernetes. Okay, so I'll give the statement this way. There are, sorry, there are 4 types of ingress controller. Okay, the very first, Nginx. Okay, and the second one, HA proxy. Okay, the third one, traffic. Okay, and the fourth one, GCE, Google Cloud Engine. It is also one of the controller. GCE, I'll give it in a bracket. Google Cloud Engine. Okay, this is powered by GCP. Okay, remember that we do have 3 cloud providers in the market. One is AWS, the second one is Azure, third one is GCP. The GCE, which is Google Cloud Engine, which is powered by GCP as a cloud platform, as a controller. See, this controller, we can use it for many of the purpose. In this Kubernetes component, we can also use the GCE controller to achieve an ingress, to configure ingress controller as GCE, and also for Nginx, and also for HA proxy, traffic, and GCE. Okay, now the Kubernetes supports only on GCE controller and Nginx. This HA proxy and traffic we will not use in the Kubernetes because that depends on the requirement. That's it. Okay, if they have configured ingress controller as HA proxy and traffic, they have their own dedicated with licensed controller. They configure to achieve an ingress. Okay, now the Kubernetes supports only on GCE controller and the Nginx controller. Okay, so I'll give that statement also here. Kubernetes supports only on GCE controller and the Nginx controller. See, Nginx controller is basically the build. Okay, we also have the Linux build and we also have the Windows build of Nginx controller. You were able to understand when I'm saying the build here. Build is an executable where we can also download the Nginx controller from where JFrog Artifactory, which they kept it in the binary storage tool, or from your where we store our static files, S3 bucket, or maybe we can also download it from the where Nginx. There is one more tool, no, where we store our build, JFrog Artifactory Nexus, right, where they can keep the build, and whenever we need it to the Kubernetes components, Kubernetes concepts to achieve an ingress, that controller to be configured, we can download it from the binary storage tool called from JFrog Artifactory, or from the Nexus, or from your S3 bucket, right? Correct, right? So you were able to understand this statement.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now this, let's say an example of the ingress. How do we write an ingress manifest, and what are all the components that we have the ingress to achieve an ingress? to expose our application. So as I said, see, this is very simple concept. See, the ingress is basically an API of an object that manages external access to the services within the cluster in Kubernetes, okay, which exposes HTTP and HTTPS, which means where we able to access our application via the port, the protocol called HTTP and HTTPS, that is through the ingress only. See here, this statement says which exposes the HTTP and HTTPS, which means we are able to access our application in the internet via this ingress only. Okay, to configure this ingress controller should be configured. So as I said, what is the benefit? What is the purpose of this ingress controller? Ingress controller transfers the request to the routing role to pick the particular request to the particular pod. You getting it?
Yes.
Now, there are, as I said, there are 4 types of ingress controller in the market currently. The very first, Nginx. The second one is HA proxy, and the third one is traffic. Fourth one is GCE. These are 4 are ingress controller, the ingress controller build, which is this is powered by Nginx community, and this is powered by HA proxy, and this is maybe from the Azure, and this is from the GCP. Okay, these are all the builds. Okay, that's how they configured. So when I'm saying about the build is an executable file where we use it as a dependency of our application. In our case, what is our dependency? Dependency is our ingress controller, right? To achieve an ingress controller should be configured. Ingress controller is a build as a dependency that we make use of ingress controller to achieve an ingress to expose our application into the internet through this way. Okay, we do configure ingress manage load balancer, we do configure our ingress controller, and we have to configure routing role and the exposed services, and through these services the request will go to the particular pod. That's how this ingress works. Okay, this all component we call it as cluster. This everything runs inside the cluster, right? So as I said, ingress is where is our first statement? Traffic coming into the network or service, correct? It is happening here. Traffic is coming into the cluster, right? Inside the cluster, what is happening? We need to configure ingress. We need to configure the ingress controller. We need to configure the routing role. We need to configure the services. Through these services, the request should go to the pod. Guys, this is basically completely on the Kubernetes networking part. If you thoroughly understood this, then only you were able to achieve your ingress. This is must and should. So this is the different team which is handled by the DevOps networking. We do also have the platform DevOps, SRE, and DevOps network, and the pure DevOps. Pure DevOps in the sense where they handle the end user. After the see, this configuration is our initial step. Means this is also done by our team only, which is DevOps. Once this is one-time setup. Once you've done this ingress configured and where you given the KT to the team members, they can also use this configuration file to customize their application. This is done by the DevOps network. Okay, the actual DevOps, what they do, they'll make use of this ingress routing role. They'll build an application through this configuration, so called the DevOps. See, we play around within the project to succeed. We are giving dedicated resource to achieve this application in the project. There are a lot of teams, there are a lot of domains that we work with all the teams. That's what I'm trying to say here. Okay, now, so as I said, ingress, to achieve an ingress controller to be configured, and there are 4 types. One is Nginx, HA proxy, and GCE. Okay, now how this manifest looks to configure ingress, right? So I'm gonna write it here. the very first line, which is API version, correct? API version. Here I'm gonna write the API version of Kubernetes. Here I'm gonna write networking dot kubernetes dot io slash v1. See, before are we rating any networking kubernetes.io, this API in our pod.yml, in our deployment.yml, in our server.yml? No, right?
No.
No, just
When we are configuring Ingress only, we are writing networking.kubernetes.io slash v1, which means we are configuring the networking part in our specific cluster to expose our application. That is the reason we are writing the very first line in Ingress, the API version, which is networking.kubernetes.io, the version of Kubernetes, right? So the second line will goes to the kind, right? So what is the kind here?
Ingress.
Ingress, right? So that's what we are trying to create here, right? And the third component, component, which is metadata, correct? So under metadata, what we need to write? Your ingress name, correct? So what is your ingress name? Your ingress name, you can take it as sample ingress, right? Or your dev ingress, right? So this is our ingress name, right? Similarly, we do have annotations. Okay, so this annotations we do use to have the specific label and to pick the particular API, right? So under annotations, I'm gonna write nginx. Here I'm configuring our ingress controller, nginx dot ingress dot kubernetes.io slash rewrite target hyphen target colon slash. Okay, so this is an annotations where we use our ingress configuration. Okay, now after this metadata, we'll have to go to the spec. So here under the spec, what we need to write, this spec related to the ingress only, not related to your any pod or any deployment or any service, right? So now I'll start from here. Ingress class name. Okay, so we do use the class name to divide the ingress. So when we are in a huge network, the lot of network that we configure, we do divide in a class name. Okay, so called nginx example. Okay, here we do configure our routing rule, right? Rules. Okay, this rules we do have http, correct, and the path. So we'll start from here, the path, and the actual path is this path slash test path. I'll give it this way, test path. Okay, and the path type should be, I'll tell what is this path and the path type and all. So let me write it first, prefix. I'll name it as prefix. Okay, and the backend application, backend to the service called service, and the name of the service called test. Name of the service called test. Okay, and for this particular service, we do have the port number, which is number 80. Okay, so this is how the simple ingress manifest that we wanted to write here. See, let me explain one by one. So this, the very first line, we are calling the networking API of Kubernetes to achieve an ingress, so called networking.kubernetes.io. Okay, the kind, obviously we are creating ingress here. We should specify the kind as ingress. Metadata, the third component in the manifest, which is metadata. Under metadata, we should define the ingress name. In our case, the ingress name is dev ingress, right? So if you go to your diagram here we do have our dev ingress to achieve an ingress. Just the name that I'm pointing here as an ingress name, annotations. So after the ingress name, I have pointed as annotations. Annotations, this helps to pick the Kubernetes API to expose our application. This is basically the label. Okay, we'll take this way. Label to achieve an ingress as nginx ingress kubernetes.io rewrite target. It's go to the target as Kubernetes API. Just a minute. What happened?
Is the argument mandatory annotations?
Yes.
Okay.
When we are configuring ingress, annotations is mandatory. Why we are using annotations is we are just dividing the networking part. That is the reason we should use the annotations. See,
And
this is basic.
the end one you given is the root path, right? Is it a path after colon?
Yes.
Okay.
This is the path.
Okay.
This is the path. That's what. See, suppose if your application is having www.flipkart/payment.com, right? So this path picks this annotations only, this slash / after this slash it picks that particular path to pick the particular networking component, which is API of Kubernetes, which is from this. That is the reason we do point the annotations. Clear with this?
Okay, got you.
Okay, now I'll remove this. Okay, now the fourth component, which is spec. This spec is related to the ingress only. Okay, after the spec, I used ingress class name. So ingress class name is basically to divide the network. So we do have, see when you apply this kubectl apply ingress.yml, it gives the class name as nginx example. Means it's a kind of namespace in ingress. Okay, it is not actual namespace. For your understanding, I'm saying the class name is basically dividing the network by giving some name, the label. That's why we use ingress class name as nginx example. The actual component says nginx dev. Suppose if you are divided with the environments, suppose if you are divided with the networking part like the zones, nginx east us, nginx north us, right? That's how we do give the class name. That particular class represents that network zone has their own application API to pick that application to be exposed via the ingress. You were able to understand this statement as a class name?
Yes.
Okay, that's how this class name that you define. After this class name, we should define the routing rules here. According to our diagram, according to our this diagrammatic representation, we should define the routing rule, correct? So what is this routing rule and what this define? So as I said, ingress exposes HTTP and HTTPS, correct? So under the routing rule, we should define HTTP. Under the routing rule, we should define HTTP, the paths of our application. See, this path means suppose our application saying www.whatsappweb dot let's just for an example chats.web.com. Okay, so this is our application. It is followed by http :/ correct. Say like this is our application that we built. This we wanted to expose to the web by setting this routing rule to the internet as according to this application. Okay, now so this routing rule we need to configure either HTTP or HTTPS. When you configure HTTP, the port should be 80 and HTTPS either 443 or 8080, correct? HTTPS for 443, right? Suppose if you point your HTTPS it should be 443.
Yeah.
Now our protocol should be HTTP. Now the port is 80. Okay, so after our routing role that we configured HTTP, I have written here as paths. What is this path? This path should expose as an after the slash. Say like instead of this chats, my application is saying, my complete website is saying slash chats, correct? Slash chats or dot here after my application saying slash here. So this is how we built as an customized application. Okay, the path that I have pointed as slash test. So where is my slash? My slash is here. Okay, path should pick means till here. You getting my point? As a path type prefix. Prefix suffix. We know the prefix and suffix, right? Prefix means before
Before,
slash,
yeah.
correct? Suffix means after the
After
slash.
slash.
Now here my application web URL is saying slash as a path. Prefix means pick this path. Before slash what it is having? HTTP, right? What is my network routing rule? It is saying HTTP, right? The path type we are dividing before and after slash to configure this DNS to expose our application. This is how we need to define our routing role under the rules. Okay.
So the path should be HTTP colon slash slash test path. So if
If
I define
if you
prefix.
want, yeah, if you want to implement the application this way, suppose if you don't want to keep this slash, you can point directly this test path instead of having the slash here in the, because we should have the slash in our application, right? So
But
say
then
suppose,
path type is not required if I do define only without slash.
no, this you are saying path type.
If I define it without slash in the path, then why prefix is not required, right there?
No, it's not like that. Path type prefix means either you can take this path after the slash or before slash.
Okay.
See, why this required is, say suppose when you have an application HTTP colon slash Flipkart slash payment slash orders. When you hit this URL, you will get some your orders list, correct?
Yeah.
Correct, right? So
Yes.
this is the, in this case, how do we configure our path here? Slash payments, correct?
Payment. Yeah.
Correct, right? So
Yes.
this is the reason we should define path type as prefix. Before it should pick your Flipkart. After that as a path type as payments. And similarly, we can also have one more path, which is hyphen path as what? Slash orders, correct?
Yes.
Orders.
So Flipkart, we buy the domain and add this name there, the path
1
name.
minute, let me complete this. Path
Okay.
type as prefix,
Prefix.
correct?
Yeah.
So when we use this application, say suppose when we have the multiple domains in our application, in our website that we configured. So ultimately our application is Flipkart. K-A-R-T, right? K-A-R-T. So ultimately our application is Flipkart, but
Mm.
how do we track our payments? How do we track our orders? That will go to the particular names to the specific database. That database picks handled by specific pod, and this payment is handled by the specific pod, which is achieved through this request. Okay, this P1, say like this P1 is having some payment pod and this P2 is having some orders pod. Every orders which is handled by this particular pod, every payments which is handled by this particular pod. That's how the routing rule that we are configuring by making use of these paths, by setting the path and the path type as prefix. Clear?
Clear.
Now, what is your question?
No. My question
Hmm.
was if
Hmm.
so exactly we buy the domain of Flipkart here, then we add the name service, right, in the domain.
See, domain you will purchase flipkart.com, right?
Yeah.
But your domain says flipkart.com. But where you will keep your data, where you will handle your data, right?
Yeah.
via the database. See,
Yes.
suppose if you want to maintain your payment, how you will get to know order is placed when you will get a confirmation once the payment is done, right?
Yes.
We'll get a response from the payment application, either the gateway or maybe in your internet banking or maybe via the card, the gateway system,
Yeah.
which is handled by this particular pod. Here there are two things. One is the payment. After the payment, it should go to the order placed,
Orders.
correct?
Yeah.
Now, how do we handle this in Ingress? Through the routing rule.
Hmm.
The first pod handled the payments. The
Hmm.
second pod will handled by the orders, right?
Yes.
So this data is stored, which is handled by the database itself is a pod. Your database itself is a pod that we configured in our manifest as a routing rule till here.
Okay.
Clear?
Yeah.
That's how we do set the prefix as slash payments as slash orders. Here we are diverting the traffic to the particular pod to pick the particular request which is comes to the cluster.
But
Inside our cluster, 1 minute. Inside our cluster, we do have our ingress configured to the ingress controller. By the routing rule, we do divert the traffic to the particular pod. Okay. Now, what is your question?
how does this ingress exactly route to the particular pod with through which it finds the pod?
Through this configuration only.
No, do we define the domain name in the pods itself? That
No, no,
slash
no, no.
payment.
Wait. Don't go to the domain configuration in the YAML,
Okay.
in the manifest configuration.
My question here is exactly
Hmm.
so you have defined the ingress here, right?
Hmm.
So this ingress has to route the network or the anything to the pods,
Yes,
two different pods. How
correct.
does this exactly refer to it? How through which argument it will find that particular pod here?
Okay, that is the reason we have pointed here is Kubernetes networking. Through this, we link our domain to this Kubernetes API from our API server, right? Correct, right? We registered our domain through this Kubernetes API. That's why we provide under API of Kubernetes version 1, and we are pointing annotations with the same, right? Kubernetes.io. This,
That's okay, but the pods has to be defined, right? By which this one through labels we match services with the labels, right?
hmm,
Generally,
hmm,
the services will be matched with the pods with
hmm.
through labels. But how does this ingress exactly routes to different pods?
See,
With
that's what we have defined a path here. See, it will look for a particular path through an ingress controller via this ingress. This creates ingress itself as a pod. Through that particular pod, search for a payment as a pod that we configured. It is already available as a database in that as a pod. Through this, it picks the particular pod. We will not gonna define any particular pod inside the ingress configuration.
no, not inside it. The pods will be externally defined, right?
Hmm,
With another YAML file.
hmm,
How does it route to that? How does it exactly match to that? So if we have around 20 or 30 pods,
hmm.
how does exactly Ingress know that this has to go for this payment spot?
That's why I'm saying here. See, under spec, see this pods, we will keep it ready in our cluster, correct? Here.
Hmm. Hmm.
So your question is how this
Yeah,
pod
how does it get to
particularly
know?
configured.
Hmm.
That's what I'm saying. Say like this pod is payment and this pod is for orders, correct?
Hmm. Hmm.
These pods are readily up and running in the cluster, correct?
Yes.
We are configuring this payment pod as a pod spec. Here, for an example, I'm saying payments. It looks for the payment pod which is available inside our cluster.
Okay, the
Say
pod
suppose
name should be
particularly
payments in the
Let me
metadata.
complete. Let me complete.
Ha ha ha.
This pod has their own
YAML
configuration, right?
file.
The
Yeah.
own name,
Ah.
right?
Yes.
To pick this particular pod, we do configure. Say like your this pod has their own IP or some number,
Ah.
right?
Yes.
That
Yes.
number we're gonna configure here, right? You getting my point?
Yeah. This is what I asked.
Payments,
Hmm.
yes. Payments. That's what I said. Payments. See, that's what I'm saying multiple times. There are
Hmm.
two pods which is handled by payment and pod 2 is handled by orders, correct? So if I'm writing here payments and orders, it will look for the pod which is available. These pods are itself as a database to handle our routing rule to pick a particular pod, right?
Yeah.
So this picks the particular pod. Say suppose this is having some another number, say like orders hyphen followed by some number, and it picks the particular pod to route the traffic, right?
Yeah.
And the path types as prefix, and the application might be, if it is backend, it will go to the backend service. Obviously database runs in backend, that's why I have written backend here, and the name as test path for an example, and the port is 80. That's how the traffic route to the rule, to the manifest inside our YAML configuration. That's how we need to understand. Clear?
Yeah. Sorry to ask, but one more question. But so if we do have multiple pods for the same replication pods, so can we mention multiple pods in the one ingress itself?
Yes, we can mention. That's why we do have the class name. Say like this class name has Nginx example. This say like we divide some of the pods. We are tagging it as an Nginx example. Similarly, we do also have Ingress class name. Ingress class name as Nginx example 1. Okay, so there are, see, this class name has some 10 pods, and this class name has some another 10 pods. So how do we configure this in the routing rule? Here in the same path, suppose if this 10 pods, when you've done the deployment, if it is handling the payments of all 10 pods, because multiple users may order multiple times, right?
Yeah.
To handle that traffic, we do have the deployment written in the deployment configuration. All 10 pods will be handled by this payment. Okay. Similarly, we do have the Nginx example 1 is handling some another 10 pods, which is handled by orders, right? So immediately if the user is done the payment, we should give the immediate order. It should happen in a fraction of seconds. We should not get the downtime when we are getting the response of an orders, right?
Yeah.
That's how we do use the class name when we wanted to handle the multiple pods in a Kubernetes network, in the Kubernetes concepts.
And how do we get this name? That payment number you said, that
See,
one.
this
Where
is
to
for an
get that one?
example. I said when you want to actual the application that you wanted to implement. Say suppose, let's take an example of in my project, we do have handled multiple features in the sense,
Microservices.
yes, microservices.
Okay.
Okay, so either of those, we divide the feature into the particular pod to handle a feature. Say like gestures, when you turn your right hand, you should get some response as a gesture. Xbox, right?
Yeah.
PlayStation,
Yeah.
right? So that when you, that data to be handled by a feature that we configure in the pod, and that pod we need to give the pod name here as a gesture 1. Okay, this pod says the pod name called gesture 1. Here instead of payments, I'm going to write it here as gesture 1. When I write gesture 1, it picks this particular pod. Similarly, when I want to handle the gestures 2 based on the feature, it picks this gestures 2 pod, which is tailed. When we tilt the right hand, it should give some response to your activity, to your response, right? The data and the code completely handled by this microservice that we are converting into the pod. That name that we're giving it as gesture 2. Instead of orders, I'm going to give it as gesture 2 followed by some name. Or internal project will be having their own specific internal name that we need to provide here.
Okay, basically it's the deployment name of the pods.
Deployment, yes.
Service.
Yes. When you deploy this, when you deploy in terms of deployment, you can point your deployment name here. Else, if your dedicated pod is handling some specific wanted data, you can point it here directly.
Okay.
So basically, you need to point your deployment here.
Okay. Got
So
you.
it picks the complete pod and it will handle all the data to route the traffic, the routing role.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yes. So any other questions, guys? So this is about the ingress. So so if you wanted to implement any banking sector, any banking application, so say suppose if you are in a HDFC application or HDFC project that you are working, HDFC followed by / customer / accounts, right? So we will be having maintaining multiple accounts data, the user data, the customer data, right? So if that is the case, we should divide the traffic to route the rule. Guys, just a minute. Give me a minute, please.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. So we were talking about this ingress, right? So say suppose when you are in a banking sector, right? So either HDFC or HSBC or maybe international banks called ICAC, they do have their separate domain they created. The domain is obviously hdfc.com, right? But they do have handled the data this way, right? So each domain, each path should be handled by particular pods. We should configure ingress to handle the data to route the traffic. Okay, that's what I wanted to say here. Clear with this? You guys are with me? Am I muted or?
Yes.
No, it's clear, sir.
Yeah. So anybody has any questions here? Because this is very important. When you are talking about ingress, you should be very clear when you are making a statement and you need to explain all these things. And ingress, that's how this, you can write a diagram, share your screen and see, don't worry about the spelling mistakes. Give them an idea, give them a clarity, explain them, make them understand. That's it. Clear with this?
So by the same way, we just define the class name as GCP if required. If we want it is GCP, then we can go with the different class name, right? And the networking API version.
See, class name is basically we are tagging some pods. We are giving some name. That's it. There is
Sorry,
nothing in our
not
class
class name.
name.
The API version will be different, right? If we want
Yes.
the other than Nginx.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, sir.
So you can give class name as any class name that you need to configured with the Ingress controller.
Okay.
Any questions, guys? Anything that you want to understand? You can ask any questions. I'll only pick a name.
Sir, firstly, we have to create the pods, right, to manage this
Yes.
Ingress controller.
Exactly. We
Also,
should be
services
ready.
also we have to configure that load balancing.
Sorry, what is your question?
The previous classes we have done, right? So the services.
Exactly. So we need to create a pod and the services to be exposed. We keep it ready. That service, we will just configure this routing role to pick that particular pod to pick a particular data. That's it.
Okay, sir.
Clear?
Yes.
Yes. Anybody has any questions again? I'll only ask Amrita B. See, you can ask questions, guys, because see this. I know this concept is very very new to you, but you can ask a questions. Maybe silly also fine for me, but I can give a clarity to you. Anybody, because you should get understanding on this. See, you may get work also. If you're not work also, you should understand this ingress, because when we are in the when we are switching a domain, when we are entering into the domain, we should understand each and every concept. Okay, so Jairam, Nagareddy, Pooja HB, Rakshita, Arun, any questions, guys? There are 16 people, huh? Okay. Rakshita,
Yes, sir.
any questions? You understood
No.
this concept?
Yes, I understood how does ingress works.
Did you understood clearly?
Yes, sir.
Why we use ingress controller?
To distribute the traffic to the pods.
Don't say that distributed traffic, route the traffic.
Okay.
Content of request. Here, controller which helps to transfer the incoming request.
Okay.
Be specific and add some technical term in your statement.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
To transfer the incoming traffic to the
Incoming
pods.
request to the routing rule. See, in between routing rule, ingress, your controller will come. Okay, here,
Yes.
your ingress controller will come. That you need to explain clearly. So where the ingress traffic is coming into the ingress, and the ingress controller will route the traffic, transfer the request to the routing rule based on the
Yes, sir.
content of request.
Yes, sir.
Clear?
In the cluster, it will work.
Yes, inside the cluster only it will
Inside the
happen.
cluster.
Sir, able to understand things, but need a sample project end to end to deploy exactly how this all how does this all of
See,
this works.
this ingress is basically works on the purchased domain. We cannot
Yeah.
give the actual project, correct? So basically you can understand the concept and you can deploy. Till here you can create ingress and you can
Uh,
create an ingress pod, but these paths and path type and the domain that we wanted to define here, right? And we
huh.
should have the purchased domain to
I have
work
the
on
domain.
this actual ingress. You
Domain we
have
have.
the
Yeah,
domain.
yeah. We have the domain from
You
GoDaddy, but
you
not
is it
able
a
to.
licensed one?
Yeah, licensed one.
Okay, you can
Licensed
use
from
it.
Amazon.
Yes, you can use the same domain and pick any of the application and expose that. See, you should be able to access your GoDaddy via your customized cluster.
Yeah.
Getting my point?
Yeah, got you.
You
But
should spin
huh.
up. You should create a cluster
Hmm.
in any of the cloud or in your local is fine.
Hmm.
From that, you are currently we are working with what is our cluster name? Minikube.
Yeah.
Your
Local.
Minikube should support to expose our application as a GoDaddy to the internet. Your GoDaddy should support to your Minikube cluster to expose your application, to expose your what you said, that GoDaddy one.
Minikube is not creating the IP, the external IP with the load balancer, because
Yes,
it's that is the testing. We use it for testing purpose only, right? It's not getting
yes,
created.
yes. So what you need to do, you
Huh.
will have the cluster created in your AWS,
Hmm.
connect to that cluster
Hmm.
and make a connectivity into your AWS account, then create a pod. You need to go from scratch. You need
Huh.
to create a pod of your GoDaddy
Hmm.
and you need to create your deployment.
Hmm.
Suppose create only one deployment, add a replica one and expose the service. When you're exposing your services, you need to initially create a cluster IP, try accessing internally in the cluster
Hmm.
and expose one of either node port or load balancer.
Hmm.
Try accessing in the internet with the external IP. If both works, then you can go for ingress.
Ingress. Yeah, got you.
Yes. Can you do this?
Yeah, we'll do them in the weekends, not today or tomorrow.
Anything, any day is fine. But if you have the domain purchased, licensed purchased, code is available to create your pod, and you can create it.
Okay.
The overview that I have given, but you can create. But if
Okay.
you create, you can give a demo to everyone.
Okay, sir. Sure.
Yes. Anybody has any questions again?
Like as Sandeep, like here we are using Ingress instead of load balancing, right?
Ingress instead of load balance. What? I did not get your question.
Means like it's like routing our traffic to the ports directly, na? So no need to like integrate load balancing here.
Load balancing. No. See, we will not configure any load balance here in the Ingress configuration. What is your question actually?
He meant actually we create load balance in the services, right?
Okay, load balancer as a service type that you are
Yeah.
saying. We
Yeah.
should yeah. See, we do have 4 types of services. Either cluster IP is default. Why we use cluster IP? We should checking the application. We are able to accessing the application internally in the cluster, right? So once we done with the cluster IP, we should go with either node port or load balancer apart from Ingress, because we are checking the application whether we are able to accessing the application in the web. Either we should go with a node port and load balancer. Okay. After that only we should achieve an ingress via this configuration. So if you are not able to access your application via the load balancer as a service, you will not achieve an ingress. Because this network.kubernetes.io, this API is pick the data from the API server. Okay. So wherever you expose your application, it will pick that data so that it concludes your application is accessing the non-secured IP, which is external IP. It gives a direction to give this routing rule and the ingress via this ingress with the purchased domain to expose your application via ingress.
We are setting rules in Ingress, not in load balancing, right?
Why you are going load balancer again and again? See, here we are setting only the rules. Okay. Load balancer is different. Your ingress is different.
Load balancer is for multiple nodes. Ingress is for multiple pods, actually.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Clear?
Yeah, got it.
Any other questions, guys? Okay. If not, can you guys work on this ingress and try to create a pod and expose similar command? After this, you can create, after writing this YAML, kubectl apply -f. You create ingress.yml, and after apply, you will have to kubectl get ingress. Okay. And after that, you can write kubectl describe ingress followed by your ingress name, ingress underscore name. Okay. Can you create this?
Yes, Sandeep.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If not having any questions, can we wind up the session?
Yeah.
So tomorrow I'm going to explain Helm charts. Let's explore more on Helm.
Okay.
So another 2 more sessions to complete Kubernetes, because I'm giving more details to you guys. The only thing that you need to understand, at least if you're not getting a hands-on experience with possibilities, you can work independently. See this ingress and all, at least you can understand the concept and explore more. Okay. If you have the purchased domain, if you have the code to build, to create a pod, you can work on it. See, in a one day, you can create a pod deployment ingress and all, right? And the services that you can expose, right?
Yes.
So you should have the dedicated time to work on this, right?
Yeah.
So try to work as much as possible. If you're getting an error, let's explore on that on that and let's discuss that thing only if you are getting an error. Okay.
We do not configure egress, right? Not required.
Yeah, that is not required. Why? Because only that we expose ingress,
Huh?
because we should have the application, the request should come to the application, right?
Yeah, but
And obviously if you're see, obviously when you have the purchased domain,
uh-huh.
if it is hitting your particular sub path here,
Hmm.
okay, so say
Hmm.
suppose if you are hitting your URL saying flipkart/payment/orders,
Hmm.
when you're saying this input in your browser,
Hmm.
obviously the traffic is going out from the cluster to this domain,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
That's how we will not configure egress, but we should know what is egress.
Okay. So by default, it
Similarly,
will go out of the
yeah.
cluster.
Why? Because that's why we do use the purchased domain
Hmm.
to handle our application.
Okay.
Any questions again? Guys, if not,
So
let's
this
wind up.
entire this creation of pods and ingress controller, so we'll be automating via the pipeline, right? Automations.
Yes, via the pipeline.
We will not be doing it
Nothing.
manually, right? So I have to
No,
log
no, no,
in.
no. Nothing we do manually. Everything works on the pipeline. When you run the pipeline, your pipeline should create cluster. Pipeline should create your pod, create your service, exposed, and then configure your ingress controller, configure ingress, and ultimately you should be able to access your application once you run your pipeline and delete the data. So what inside your container, everything works. After the work completion, you will delete the container. That's it.
Okay.
So
So
that,
we'll go with Jenkins or like the Azure DevOps pipelines, right? In this
yes,
case.
Azure ADO, either we can go with Azure ADO or we can go with Jenkins or we can go with GitHub Actions or GitLab, any pipeline.
Okay, smart.
Clear?
Yes, I got it.
Okay, let's wind up the session. Tomorrow we'll discuss on the Helm charts. Meantime, you can work on this ingress and
Sandeep, Sandeep,
services.
once again. What kind of the application we can build for this to use? Is it it contains any API is okay, right?
See,
Database.
when you are talking about the API, you should use the proper Kubernetes API.
Okay.
Suppose if you are handling database, you should have that particular API
Okay.
that is connected to the Kubernetes networking.
Okay. So no, like if I build the database which contains the database application, so that I can use the specific networking, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Okay. Fine. Thanks.
Guys, are you getting confidence that you can clear an interview and you can work independently when you get work on this, at least?
Yeah, with the help of
Yes. Yes. Sandeep.
documentations and others, yeah, we can. I think so.
Yes, correct, right?
Yeah.
So, see, normally when you are setting up a pipeline, all the stages will work on inside your Docker container and runs all your clone, build, checkout, everything, all the command, all the stages, including your Kubernetes configuration. After all completion, you will delete your container, right? This is how we need to implement in the modern technology. Okay, getting my point?
Yeah.
And we should delete the data because we should not. Why we go this method? Based on the need basis. Say suppose when we are having a 10 member of team, so I may working for one feature and you rest of the 9 members can be working for the 9 features, rest of the 9 features. Simultaneously, they wanted to build their job, right? So in the number of executors in Jenkins, we do define 10, the number of executors. All 10 members can build their job at the same time, correct? Correct, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
in the stages, you will create your pod, you will create your, initially you will create your cluster. Inside your cluster, you will create your pod, your deployments, your services, your ingress, everything, right? And another can configure another job based on their feature if they are working. Maybe he wants to build his pod, he wants to spin up a pod, right? everything, each pipeline should be create a container, create a virtual environment. Inside the container, all stages will run. After the stage completion, you will delete your container so that you can avoid the costing. And you are optimizing your pipeline by dockerizing your pipelines to making use of Docker container. Getting my point? That's how you need to explain to them. And even when you're working in a project also, you will have to configure your Docker is very important here. Docker is very booming technology that when you learn more and more, you will get more new concept. Okay. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Clear.
Yes. Let's wind up the session. Let's connect tomorrow, same time. Okay. So I'll share this in the group. What
Morning
happened?
or same you
Morning
mentioned?
only. We'll connect morning.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.